In the last discussion, we talked about connection, direction, and correction. Today, I want to talk a little more about correction because it can be so challenging. It's hard to know what to do if your child won't obey, likes to break the rules, or wants to do things their own way. There are many children who respond well to most parenting techniques. They seek for connection, they listen to direction, and they respond well when correction is in order. They have a desire to please their parents and teachers and respond well to rewards and consequences. Then there are those children who push back and resist. They seem more intense and have a hard time harnessing their energy and are more impulsive. I was blessed to have the opportunity to raise 4 children, and every single child was different. I had a super laid back child and a child who was very intense, and then I had 2 in between. I don't have my PhD and I'm not a professional, but as a mom with years of experience, I can tell you that what worked for 3 of my children did not work for my child with a harder temperament. Many so-called harder children have been given a diagnosis or label. A few are ADHD, ADD, oppositional defiant disorder, emotionally disturbed, behavior disorder, depression disorder, anxiety disorder, conduct disorder, PTSD, bipolar, and many more. There are many opinions on labels, but that's not what I want to discuss today. Just as I had to work harder to meet the real demands of parenting a labeled child, I know my child had to work much harder than the average child to appropriately control and channel his intensity. Life with this child had always been more challenging than it had been with my other children, but when he turned 12, I knew I needed to seek the advice of a professional. I took my child to a psychiatrist who did an extensive psychological workup. It included a month of tests, evaluations, and assessments. My son was diagnosed with several disorders, and it was suggested that he begin weekly counseling sessions with the head psychiatrist. Those sessions with the psychiatrist didn't even last a month. And when I asked the doctor what I was supposed to do next, he recommended that I read 2 books. One was called Transforming the Difficult Child by Howard Glasser and Jennifer Easley, and the other was called Your Defiant Teen by Russell A. Barkley and Arthur L. Robin. I believe the suggestions and information in these books is what saved my son and my relationship during the next several years. Learning and following through with what I learned was some of the hardest work I've ever done, but it was worth all the time, energy, and effort it took. I don't know how we would have made it through the years when he was 12 until he was 16 years old without following the outlined steps in these books. I would strongly encourage any parent to read these. Today, I'm going to share just a few key points that help me understand, and I hope will help you understand your child better. What professionals have found is that those children that have a more difficult time and are more challenging have very sensitive energy detectors. They learn and look for ways to create energized responses. Energy is what lights them up and fills their empty bucket. The problem with traditional parenting approaches is that parents don't often show much excitement when a child isn't breaking the rules. When a child is doing their chores or homework, has a good attitude, sits and listens, and is behaving, they are rarely noticed. Children usually receive much bigger reactions when they are misbehaving. These children aren't interested in whether the excitement or lively response is a positive or negative one. Any elevated energy is a payoff for this kind of child. Children learn quickly that they can gain more by acting out than by using good self-control. The problem is that self-esteem is directly linked to whether a person feels like they have self-control or self-discipline. Self-esteem equals self-control. So the child who's acting out and receives energy in a negative way and gets a negative payoff by receiving negative attention, they may feel a moment of satisfaction, but it's like eating junk food. They can eat it all day long, but they'll still be hungry because there's no nutritional value. In the book, Transforming the Difficult Child, it outlines 3 main strategies for intense parenting, and I want to kind of go over the first 2. The first one is no payoffs for negative behavior. Number 2 is purposely creating and nurturing a child's success. The third one, which I'll talk about in the next discussion we have, is absolute clarity, meaning consistent, committed boundaries and consequences. So to better understand number 1, we need to understand what constitutes a negative payoff for the intense child. Standard methods of parenting that would have an excellent chance of working well for children with easier temperaments often won't work for these children. The more intense the child, the more intense the parenting interventions are needed. Many of the things you've done or been told good parents do are actually payoffs for negative behavior for a difficult child. Like when we sit down and we talk about the problem, or when we try to reason with the child. We try to help him or her better understand what they're doing wrong. We teach them about why their behavior is a problem for themselves and others. Or we allow them to tell us their side and give excuses for their behavior. Just talking about problems can deepen the impression and belief the intense child already has that he gets more close relationships by way of negative issues. So if we aren't supposed to do these 5 things, talk about the problem and try to reason with the child and help them better understand what they're doing wrong, teach them why their behavior is a problem, and allow them to tell you their side of the story, then what are we supposed to do? These children learn best when we create opportunities and nurture the child's success. So, there's a story in one of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books that describes how Shamu, the 19,000-pound whale, was trained to jump over a rope that was 22 feet in the air. It would have been nice if the trainer could have hung a bucket of fish 22 feet high and Shamu would have just jumped over the rope automatically to get the treat that any whale would want. But whales, just like us, need to learn line upon line. When Shamu began training, they actually placed the rope under the water at the very bottom of the tank. At first, Shamu probably didn't even notice the rope was there as he moved randomly about in the tank. But he learned very quickly that every time he swam over this colorful, long, twisted thing, he was patted, loved, and got a snack. The trainers raised the rope very slowly and incrementally. It was easy for Shamu to be successful under the water, as he easily swam over the rope and learned very quickly that whenever he did, he received praise and a reward. With time and practice, soon Shamu would begin jumping out of the water and over the rope. Providing an environment of success for a difficult child is very similar. We can begin by asking them to do very simple tasks, or notice all the little things they do that are hardly noticeable. And then we describe what they're doing in detail. I'll give you a few examples. I notice you're working hard on your drawing. I like the color of blue you have chosen and the thick stripes of yellow. I see you finished the first 6 math problems. I see the effort you're making. I appreciate when I ask you for help and you're willing to come in a reasonable amount of time and complete the task of pouring water in each glass for me. It's important to be very specific and use non-judgmental language. If your message is neutral and simply describes the reality of the moment, the child will see that it's undeniably true and cannot refute what you have said. Noticing the details helps the child feel cherished and validated. This is helpful for you as a parent who may often have a difficult time noticing any positive thing a difficult child is doing. Instead, you can view it like you're describing to a blind person any neutral thing your child is doing. In the beginning, when you start noticing things and making comments, your child may seem really annoyed and may be uncomfortable with the attention. This is normal. I like to just be straight with my child and tell him that I often find myself focusing on things they do wrong, but I've decided I want to notice all the good things they do instead. I feel better when I do this, and I hope that they'll eventually get used to it too. If you're starting to feel overwhelmed and wonder how you're going to find time to notice and then make a point to recognize your child during an already busy day, I want to remind you that every effort counts. If you were to describe 5 video moments of success a day that only take 30 seconds each, this would only take 2.5 minutes a day and would have a tremendously powerful therapeutic influence on your child's life and would begin a wonderful new pull towards successful behavior. When you think about all the time you spend trying to manage their negative behavior, it's so worth the effort. Be patient with them and especially with yourself. Intense children often have a difficult time with change. Things may seem worse before they seem better. One of my favorite thoughts is, what qualities in my child am I going to energize? Focusing on the moments when your child isn't breaking the rules and is succeeding in any small task is the foundation of a successful system. Know that you are loved, and thanks for listening. If you have a child who's struggling and would like to talk to someone, please don't hesitate to reach out. To schedule a free coaching session, go to cindyallredcoaching.com.